main track. And our first presentation is presentation by Kaito Masaki from Aiki Prefectural University, Japan. Computational efficiency improvement of period estimation method, GMRS. Kaito, you're welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you for introducing me, Mr. Chairman. I will share my presentation.
Yes, we see your presentation. We can hear you.
Thank
You are
you.
welcome.
I am Kaito Masaki from Aichi Prefectural University in Japan. Today, my presentation is entitled as a computational efficiency improvement of period estimation method, GMRS. Let me start my presentation. Here is my table of contents. Let me start with the introduction. In recent years, the Internet of Things, IoT, has been attracting attention. Specifically, it is used for prediction of machine failures, maintenance of infrastructure, and monitoring of biological signals such as respiration and heart rate. We can extract meaningful information for these applications through the analysis of the sensor outputs. This makes it possible to detect abnormalities earlier and prevent accidents. The period estimation of signals has been studied for a long time as a means for the signal analysis. However, it has been difficult to estimate the period of each of the signals where multiple periodic signals are combined. Furthermore, if there is a large power difference among the signals, the period estimation becomes more difficult. Here, I will introduce an example of applications for the period estimation. It is for the ECG monitoring of a baby inside of a mother's body. In this case, the signal from the baby is much weaker compared with that of the mother. So it is not easy to estimate the period of the baby's heartbeat because it is buried under the mother's signal. There are many other applications like this, where weak signals are overlapped by powerful signals. Therefore, the research topic is to study a period estimation method to cope with larger power differences. Before going to the proposed method, we will introduce a conventional method referred to as GMRS. Then we will improve this GMRS by the proposed method. This is an example obtained by GMRS. GMRS is an algorithm to estimate the period of signals. The horizontal axis shows the period. The vertical axis shows the magnitude of the calculation result. The peak indicates the period. In this example, the period is 31 samples. In this slide, I will explain the mechanism of GMRS. Here is a sample sequence, and we will estimate the period. GMRS divides this sequence into a variety of fragments. For example, here, the sequence is divided every 4, 5, and 6 samples. By multiplying these fragments vertically and then taking the root, some of them grow high, but some of them not. The reason why this happens will be explained in the next slide. Now, we will explain the principle that the period can be estimated by multiplication and root. Let's look at the case that the signal is divided by the same width as the period. As an example, a signal with a period of 5 samples, and it is divided by 5 samples. It is the same width as the period. In this case, the waveform of each divided signal will be all same. When each element of the divided signal is multiplied and then averaged, we can obtain the basic waveform of one period. On the other hand, what happens if division width not equal to period? As an example, consider a periodic signal with a period of 5 samples, and let's define the division width as 4 samples. In this case, the waveform of the divided signals are different. When each element is multiplied and averaged, the waveform's ups and downs become smaller. Also, the maximum value will be smaller than when the division width is the same as the period. So far, this is the principle of the GMRS algorithm. Let us review the contents. There are 3 major steps in GMRS. First, the input signal is divided at appropriate intervals. Then, the divided signals are vertically multiplied and taken the power root. Finally, the maximum value is selected to estimate the period. Next, I will share the improvements that I have made to the GMRS algorithm. Here is my improved point to GMRS. The advantage of the proposed method is to reduce the computational complexity due to the fact that the multiplication and the root are replaced with the additions and the division, respectively. In addition to this advantage, we will examine another aspect of the proposed method. It is to enhance the performance for the multiple signals with large power differences. In the proposed method, we performed two operations to the GMRS. The first is the introduction of logarithm to the GMRS, because we can think of the power difference as smaller in the logarithmic domain. For example, the difference between 10 and 100 is very large, 90. On the other hand, after taking normal logarithms, 10 and 100 are converted to 2 and 3, and the difference is 1. Second, we add 1 to the input signal. If you take the logarithm of the absolute value of the input signal as it is, it will be greatly affected by noise, because small numbers are converted to large negative numbers. So when taking the logarithm, the signal is buried in the noise. On the other hand, if we add 1 before taking the logarithm, we can get a waveform close to the original waveform. The reason is that it matches the 0 in the logarithmic domain. This is the reason why we add 1. In summary, what I did was two major things. First, I add 1 to the input signal. Second, I apply a logarithm to the signal. This allows us to cope with even larger power differences. Next, we will conduct performance verifications by computer simulations. Let me show the simulation conditions. In the simulation, we verify the performance of the proposed method in terms of the power difference between two signals. The basic waveform of the signal imitates an ECG. The division width of the signal is 10 to 50. The number of signals is 2. The period of the two signals are 31 and 32 sampled. This basic waveform is repeated 100 times, and AWGN is given with a magnitude of 30 decibels. Using this composite signal, we performed the period estimation for 100 times and calculated the percentage of times we could estimate the period of both of the signals. The accuracy of the period estimation is expressed using a ratio. We would like to explain how to calculate the accurate percentage. For the input signal, we use a composite signal with two periods. We will perform period estimation. If the period of both signals can be estimated correctly, count up. We repeat this 100 times and finally divide by the number of period estimation. Use the percentage of correct answer as the result. The simulation result is shown here. The horizontal axis shows the power difference between the two signals in decibels. The vertical axis shows the ratio of correct period estimates. This result clearly shows that the proposed method achieves the perfect estimation till 28 decibels. However, the conventional method achieves it till 23 decibels. It means that the proposed method achieves 5 decibels improvement. Finally, here is a conclusion. The background of this research was the period estimation of signals. It becomes more and more important with the widespread of IoT. But it is difficult to estimate the period when there is a power difference among signals. We have conducted research on this issue. The key point of the proposed method was introduce the logarithm to GMRS. Now, we summarize the idea of the proposed method by the following steps. First, apply the logarithm to the input signal after adding 1 to the signal. Second, divide the signal at regular intervals. Third, perform the geometric mean of each divided signal. Finally, select the maximum value. The computer simulation result showed that the algorithm could cope with larger power differences compared to the conventional method, GMRS. For the future, we are thinking about two major things. The first is to evaluate the computational complexity. By applying logarithms, multiplications are converted to additions and roots to divisions. The second is further performance investigation. For practical use, we need to verify this method using real data. Let me finish my talk. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Unfortunately, Professor Simonkin is not available, so I will be instead of him. So please, if anyone have any question, please ask. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Yeah, have you compared your method to standard fast Fourier transformation?
I'm very sorry. You spoke too fast for me to understand.
I'm sorry. I think the standard method for detecting periods and frequencies is the fast Fourier transformation, the FFT. Have you compared with that one?
I don't compare to FFT, but I will compare it for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, I can see.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Sergey Mitrofanov. I want to present my report, study on the efficiency of methods of selecting a splitting attribute for constructing decision trees. Nowadays, artificial intelligence methods are being implemented in various areas, such as IT technologies and education. The current implementation rate of artificial intelligence methods implies the development of these technologies in order to obtain the greatest efficiency in solving applied problems. Therefore, researchers are developing various additional algorithms and procedures for classical artificial intelligence method. One of the most popular artificial intelligence methods is decision trees. This method has become widespread due to the ability to interpret the results obtained in an understandable form for a non-machine learning specialist. There are various approaches to training decision trees. Also, compositional methods have been developed on the basis of decision trees. Decision tree-based methods are applied to solve problems of classification, clustering, forecasting. The process of constructing decision trees assumes the sequential recursive splitting of the learning set into subset using decision rules at the nodes. The splitting process continues until all nodes at the end of all branches are declared leaves. It is necessary to consider some problems that need to be solved while constructing a decision tree. Each problem is associated with a corresponding step of the learning process. One of the most important problems is the selection of the attribute. According to this attribute, splitting will be performed in a given node. We analyzed the efficiency of 9 methods for selecting a splitting attribute and solving practical classification problems. Decision trees are learned by applying the ID3 algorithm. The following classes of attribute selection methods exist: wrappers, embedded, and filters. However, we discussed only filters since only it can do the splitting of the future space for an untrained model and also require less computational resources. Filters are divided into supervised and unsupervised learning. Both types of filters we have been used. Next, we will look at the filters used in this article. Selecting a splitting variable by variant. Some research papers state that the application of attribute variance estimation is an efficient way to select futures. As a rule, attributes with higher variance contribute more to the specific problem solving. Selecting splitting attribute by the mean absolute difference. The method of splitting involves calculating the average absolute difference between the values of the attribute and the mean. High values tend to have higher predictive power. Selecting a splitting attribute based on the variance ratio. The variance ratio is understood as the ratio of the arithmetic mean variance and the geometric mean variance. A higher ratio corresponds to more relevant attributes. Relief F methods. The method follows the Euler relief method. A peculiarity of relief F is its ability to be applied to multi-class data with a high level of noise. The method assumes updating the significance of each attribute based on the difference between each object of sample and the closed objects of the same and opposite classes. The greater the distance to the nearest neighbors from the same class, the less the importance of the attribute. And conversely, the greater the distance to the nearest neighbors from other classes, the importance respectively increases. We consider one of the closest objects from each class. We applied Euclidean distance as a distance metric. Fisher scoring method. The method helps to rank attributes according to the informatively for further classification. Fisher scoring is defined as presentation on the slide, as presented on the slide. The future with the highest Fisher scoring is selected as the best of splitting. Squared scar method. The method estimates if there is a significant difference between the observed and expected frequencies of two variables. Correlation-based attribute selection method. The method estimates the relevance of attributes based on the chance in their values depending on their belonging to a particular category. Therefore, the best subset of attributes for splitting contains attributes that are highly correlated with the target variable. At the same time, don't correlate with each other. Fast correlation-based filter. This method is most commonly used for high-dimensional inputs. In fact, this is a typical approach, taking into account the relevance and redundancy of attributes, within which the symmetrical uncertainty is first calculated for all attributes. The attributes are then sorted according to the values obtained for this criterion. The attribute with the highest value is selected. And separation measure method. This method selects an attribute with the most distance from each other sample class means. It is necessary to maximize the splitting ability based on the obtained values by choosing the attribute with the highest D value. The following classification problems on the slide were solved to study the efficiency of the described methods for selecting a splitting attribute. The classification accuracy and the learning time of the decision tree were selected as efficiency criteria. Each method for selecting a splitting attribute was applied. The approach to training a decision tree presented on the slide was used. For each task, 100 runs of the algorithm were carried out. Classification problems were divided into training and test samples in a ratio of 7:3. Decision tree had no restrictions on depth and were built up to 100% of the classification on the training sample. The solution started with 10 individuals and 30 generations. On the slide presents results for testing approaches on task number 1. The separation measure method is the most effective and fastest for this task, and the relief F method took a lot of time to learn. Results for testing approaches on task number 2. It is impossible to choose a leader in terms of efficiency. However, you can notice that the REFF method also takes the longest to learn. Task number 3. The separation method is the only one who has shown high classification accuracy. Task number 4. All methods have shown high classification accuracy except for the chi-squared score method, and the REFF method is also an anti-leader in terms of learning speed. Task number 5. It is difficult to draw any conclusions on this task. Task number 6. We see a multiple excess of the training duration for the correlation-based attribute selection method. Task number 7. On the slide, we again see too much training time for the REFF method. Task number 8. The separation measure method is the most effective and fastest for this task, and the REFF method took a lot of time to learn. Task number 9. It is difficult to draw any conclusions on this task because task is a risk problem. Task number 10, you can notice that the REFF method also takes the longest to learn. Task number 11, the REFF method is also an anti-leader in terms of learning speed. And task number 12, on this task, all methods show at low efficiency. This diagram shows that the REFF method is the most time-consuming on almost all tasks, but it does not show the highest efficiency. It is difficult to understand from the diagrams which method is the most effective and least time-consuming. Therefore, for ease of understanding, we average the results for each of the attribute selection methods across all classification problems. Table presents the results averaged over 12 tasks, applying different methods for selecting a splitting attribute. It is possible to conclude on the basis of the present data that the most preferable method is separation measure, since it has the highest efficiency. At the same time, lags behind the best method in terms of learning time by less than a second. Then, in the future, the separation measure method will be chosen to select an attribute for setting the separation threshold when using the decision tree learning algorithm. Thank you for your attention. I'm ready to answer your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have questions, please? Okay, then I have a question. So you tested these different methods to estimate the splitting. So how about combining them together? Do you think it will bring some benefit if you combine several methods together?
I don't combine the term methods. I don't think about it, but it's a nice idea, and I discovered this idea.
Okay, okay, you will try to do this, yes?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe anyone has some more questions?
I'm sorry for light.
No problem, no problem. Okay, so no more questions, it seems like. Okay, I think I have another one. So in these methods, you simply select the attribute for splitting. Is this right? Yes.
Yes,
But
yes.
how about detecting where exactly to split? Like you have a real valued parameter for each attribute, and you have to determine the threshold value. Is this right?
Method selected attribute for threshold.
So this was a method for threshold, not for attribute. Yes. Okay, then I have no questions. Thank you. Okay, well, so no more questions. So then thank you for your presentation. Very nice. And
Thank
our
you.
next presenter is Alexey Vakhnin with a presentation on a novel meta-heuristic for solving large-scale global optimization problems. Please.
Can you see the screen? Can you see my face? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but not very loud.
Oh, okay. I'll do my best to.
Okay, this is better. Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So I'm very happy to be here again, and today I'm going to talk with you about large-scale global optimization problems and how we can solve them. First of all, before we jump to the main part of my presentation, I'm going to pay attention my presentation outline. First of all, I'm going to talk about motivation and problem statements, about related work, of course, about proposed approach and the experimental results. I will discuss of experimental results, and in the final part of my presentation, I will do some conclusions and discuss possible future work. If some optimization problem has more than 100 objective continuous variables, we can call this type of problem as large-scale global optimization problem. Many real-world CTO problems are usually complex and not well studied. It means that it's viewed as a black box. It means that we just can measure input and output parameters, and we have no idea what's going on inside the problem. I mean, there are iteration connections between variables, and of course, we have no structure function. It's fair to say that evolutionary algorithms are good, perfect tool for black box optimization, but their performance usually decreases when the dimensionality of the search space increases. It happens because we have the curse of dimensionality. CTOR is still a challenging task for mathematical and evolutionary optimization techniques. On this slide, you can see spheres where we can face with real world job problems, these spheres are.
Excuse me, may I stop you? I see only slide 25. I think.
25.
Yes. Is this true for everyone? I see slide 25.
Wait,
Yes, the same for me.
I'll reshare my screen. Can you
Okay,
see
now
it?
it's moving to slide 2. Okay, this is better.
3?
Yes. Yes, now it's 3. Yeah. Yes, please go
okay,
on.
okay, good. Yeah, thank you. And on this slide, you can see spheres of LCGO problems, a sphere of humane activity when we can face with problems with high dimensionality. These spheres are as industrial design, robotics, synthesis of medicines, neuroinformatics, bioinformatics, and so on. Right now, you can see the chart. X-axis denotes the year, Y-axis denotes documents which were published with the large-scale global optimization topic, and as you can see, trend grows. And while CGO problems are extremely difficult, first of all, the search space grows exponentially with increasing the number of variables. The feature of the search space can change as the number of variables increases. The third one, we have the limited number of experiments, and also evolutionary algorithms cannot solve such type of problems only by increasing the number of fitness evaluations. Right now, you can see how we can define a classic LCGO problem. It can be defined as classic optimization problems in continuous variables. Using other words, we have to find the values of the set of the vector x to minimize or maximize objective function. In our study, we solved minimization problem and unconstrained. Now you can see the structure of LCGO techniques according to a big survey. Techniques can be divided into two big branches. The first branch is non-decomposition methods. The second branch is based on cooperative evolution methods. A few words about non-decomposition methods. The specific operators are created for bio-inspired optimization algorithms to overcome the crossover dimensionality. And let me describe more the second branch because of algorithms which are based on cooperative evolution methods usually demonstrate better performance than algorithms from the first branch. What's the main idea of cooperative evolution? I'd like to pay your attention that it's not algorithm, it's framework for optimization algorithms. The main idea is the next. We have to divide a large problem into two small sub-problems or small pieces and optimize them independently between each other using any optimization algorithm, any optimizer. And as optimizer in this study, we have used shared algorithm because of its well-known high-performed algorithm. It has two parameters that are self-adapting during the optimization process. Algorithm can be called as C-shade. It means that we have to decide how many number of subcomponents we have to choose and what's the population size we have to set. And that's the problem because, as I said before, we solve black box optimization problems and we have no idea about root parameters before the optimization. And in this study, we have proposed COSACC approach. It's an abbreviation, a coordination of self-adaptive cooperative evolution algorithms. It self-adapts the number of individuals and the number of subcomponents during their optimization process. How we adapted the size of population, you can see on this slide. It has very simple idea. And first of all, when we generate randomly the first population, we have to calculate DI init. It's an initial diversity of population. And after each generation, we have to calculate current diversity of population. And after that, we calculate relative measure of the diversity in the current generation of population. If our RD value are placed bottom, then the red line we have to increase the population size. It means that our population is concentrated in a small region, and if RD value are placed, RD value is placed above green line, it means that we have decreased the population size. If RD value is placed between red and green lines, it means that we have to do nothing with population size. And his brief description of method how to allocate the resources between algorithms. In this study, we have the following notation in curly brackets. As you can see, we'll put the cooperative evolution-based algorithms and the number of algorithms and the number of subcomponents in each C-based algorithms are set before the optimization process. When the number of generations is over, the algorithm that has the best performance gets the predefined number of generation. It means that we increase the resources of this algorithm, and other algorithms with worse performance lose their predefined number of generations. It's a pseudo-core of proposed algorithm, and on the 13th line you can see how we measure the performance of algorithm in this case. In this study we have used the following parameters for algorithm in comparison. The limitation of population size for consistency algorithm, minimum population size is 25, the maximum population size is 200, initial population size 100, generations, the minimum generations 5, maximum generations 50, initial generations 27. The set of subcomponents you can see on the slide, and for CC shade algorithm we have used the following fixed parameters for whole optimization process: population size 25, 50, 100, 150, 20, and we have used the following number of subcomponents: 1, 2, 4, 8, 10. When we said one subcomponents, it means that we do not use cooperative evolution because we have only one subcomponent, and we divide the subcomponent on one. To evaluate the performance of algorithms, we have used IWMMA LCGO CC 2013 benchmark set. It's the last set for LCGO problems. It has 15 benchmark problems with the dimension 1000. To evaluate the performance, we have to run our algorithm 25 times. And for one independent run, algorithm has 3 million of fitness evaluations and 5 categories of optimization problems. So you can see on the bottom of the slide, it's fully separable problems, partially separable problems with separable subproblems and with no separable problems, and overlapping problems and non-separable problems. A few words about software implementation. We use Ubuntu Linux, and ADI is code blocks, and our algorithm was written in C++ language. And in this part of my presentation, I'd like to pay attention that this type of problems are computationally expensive, and we need a lot of computer resources to evaluate the performance in each points. And that's the reason why we have built our own PC cluster. Right now it has 8 computers, 1 master PC and 7 slave PCs. The characteristics you can see in the table on the right part of the slide. The total number of computational threads is 128, and it looks like in real. And in the left part of picture, you can see slave PCs under the table, network switch is located, and in the right part of PC near my table, master PC is located. And this bar demonstrates the differences between Intel Core to-do CPU processor. This processor was mentioned in the paper which provides benchmark CSIL CGO 2013 as a reference processor. And now you can see the comparison between runtime of all experiments only on the benchmark functions. In our case, we can calculate just only, right now I'm talking about only calculation benchmark functions. I didn't add the time for running algorithm. In our case, we need a little bit more than 1 day. And in the case of single core processor, it requires about 284 days. A few words about numerical experiments. On this screen, you can see graphs, you can see charts. The first 3 bars are CC-based algorithms with a fixed number of subcomponents, and the 4th bar is an average rank of static algorithms, and the last bar is the performance of our proposed algorithm. And as you can see, our proposed algorithm always demonstrate better results on average than algorithms which it consists of. The performance is based on the average rank. Average rank is obtained on 25 independent runs, the experiments. How resource allocation looks. Right now you can see for graphs, x-axis denotes the fitness evaluations, y-axis denotes the portion of generations in our algorithms. And on this slide, you can see how our algorithm changes the population size. And it's interesting to see that in all cases, the population rapidly increase up to 200. Probably it happens because of shade has the following feature as fast convergence in the first stages of optimization. To prove the numerical experiments, we have used Mann-Whitney U-test with a normal approximation type correction. The numerical results you can see in the table. The first column contains better, worse, and equal results. The next columns denote the sets of cooperative convolution algorithms inside consistency algorithm, and the cells contain the total number of benchmark problems where our proposed algorithm demonstrates better, worse, or equal performance in comparison with the algorithm it consists of. It would be interesting to see how the performance of proposed algorithm with different sets of CC-based algorithm. And on this slide, you can see parallel diagram plot, and x-axis denotes benchmark problem, y-axis denotes rank. If algorithm is placed on the first place on some problem, it means that it has the highest rank. Also, we have used the average rank to understand what's the version of our proposed algorithm is better. It was associated with 1, 4, and 8 subcomponents. And we have compared this version of proposed algorithm with other state-of-the-art meta heuristics that they were specially created for solving this type of problems. To compare algorithms, we have used tacolab.org website. It's a toolkit for automatic comparison of optimizers. This website was specially created for comparison algorithms between each other, and results you can see in the table. And it's graphically results. And also, I'd like to pay attention that our proposed algorithm demonstrate the best performance in solving C5 class of problem. It's non-separable problems. Yeah. And according to these results, our algorithm is placed on the 3rd place in this competition. And the final part of my presentation, general conclusions and further work. First of all, I have to say that comparative evolution is an effective framework for solving optimization problems with many variables. The proposed consistency approach demonstrates better results than original CC-based algorithms with fixed number of subcomponents and with a fixed number of population size. Our proposed algorithm can compete with other state-of-the-art algorithms, solving optimization problems with high dimensionality. And COSA-CC still has the great potential for improving and solving problems with high dimensional. Thank you so much for attention, and feel free for your questions.
Thank you for your presentation. So please, if anyone have questions, please ask.
There is a question in the chat.
Chat.
Can you see my question in the chat?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, okay. I can ask right now.
You can actually
kind of-
read it for everyone, maybe.
What kind of limitations are you talking about right now?
Any kind of limitations. You are the author of your method, and I'm just curious, like, should I be warned about any kind of limitations, except, of course, computational limitations?
But we have limitations. If right now we're talking about the benchmark problems, we have limitations as
Like, are there any specific cases where your algorithm maybe is worse than some other algorithms?
But okay, I got it, Vladimir. For example, in comparison of algorithms that demonstrate better performance than our algorithm, we noted that in most cases they use EMTC LS1 algorithm. It's a multiplied trajectory search, local search one version algorithm, and we'd like to improve the performance of our algorithm using the combination of our approach and local search algorithm for solving large-scale global optimization problems.
And
Okay,
here is my
yeah.
second question
Mm.
about real world problems and in what case, yeah.
Yeah, in the next studies, we'd like to find, first of all, actual and high-dimensional problems in continuous space with a large number of variables. But unfortunately, we didn't apply our proposed methods for solving real-world optimization problems. We just tested our algorithms using this benchmark set because of this benchmark set has 15 optimization problems with different complexity. And if our approach demonstrates quite good average result in comparison of other algorithms, it means that in solving real world optimization problem, it will demonstrate better result on average, of course.
Thanks for the answer.
Because we have no idea, I said before, about the structure of problem, what parameters we have to set for our algorithm and so on.
Okay, more questions? Okay, then I will ask my question. So, as I can see, some of the algorithms to which you compare are differential evolution based.
Yes.
And what about these two methods that are better than yours?
MOS
Are they
has
based on
the
differential evolution? Or?
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, BCCA has differential evolution too. Reference algorithm in the middle of this on this bar chart, DCCG is a reference algorithm and it has differential evolution too. DeepSo has differential evolution too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my question is actually, what kind of parameter adaptation methods are they using? Are they using shade or something else? And could it be applied in your method? Maybe it will have improved it.
MOS uses many algorithms, two local searches, one genetic algorithm, and differential evolution. It's like a combination of many algorithms in one algorithm. But it's fair to say that MOS was tuned by supercomputer, and probably if it will solve other problems not from this benchmark, it will demonstrate worse performance. But
okay, but your method was also tuned by supercomputer. Okay.
But our goal is to tune main parameters during the optimization problem as population size and the subcomponents number.
Okay, I see. Thank you. So, any more questions? We have plenty of time. No? Okay, then thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. And we will be moving to the next one. So the next presentation is by Vladimir Kazakovtsev. And the presentation is about determination of the homogeneity of a set of elements on the basis of the quality characteristics of the division of a set into groups. So please, you may start.
Kozakovtsev. I'm from IWMMA University, and I present this work in collaboration with Testing Technical Center in PLPM and Rushnov University. In our country, forming the electronic component base for space devices is processed through additional tests in special research centers. This work is devoted to the issues of improving the methodology for conducting additional tests, the application of the concepts of homogeneity, of tested batches of electronic components in the process of additional tests. The problem of interpreting data obtained from the results of testing a production batch of similar items or objects arises in many areas of technology. As a rule, the purpose of testing is to determine whether the tested parameters belong to the specified ranges, if it's good enough. However, besides this main purpose, the test results obviously contain useful information about the batch as a whole. If the test results can be used to divide a batch of items into several homogeneous groups, then we can conclude that the resulting division reflects some deep-seated phenomena. The use of different groups of raw materials, different manufacturing technologies, different conditions of transportation and storage. All of the above leads us to the necessity to create ultra reliable systems. Since the space components creates only about 2% of the demand, factories cannot guarantee the appropriate level of quality. However, the systems should operate in space in rough conditions under high radiation up from 10 years to 15 years. The requirement is always imposed on the tested batch. Manufacturers fulfill these requirements. The only problem is that our definition of product batch is quite different. The standards operating within the Ministry of Electronics allow manufacturers to form production batches of semiconductor devices from raw materials containing up to 4 different crystal batches. Although in our case, the final product must be made literally from one piece of silicon. In addition, there is always a human factor. People make mistakes. In this regard, it would be good if before the destructive tests that will prove the quality, we carried out to check the tested batch of electronic components for homogeneity, to extrapolate the results of destructive tests to the whole batch. Works of Fedosov, Orlov, as well as our studies have shown that such a check is possible on the basis of analysis of the values of test parameters and elements of the tested batch, which are recorded in the course of additional tests. To carry out such an analysis, we use specially developed algorithms for sorting the elements of our electronic components into homogeneous groups in accordance with their belonging to different product batches. Thus, before creating the final product, all components must pass several tests, including the destructive ones, such as destructive physical analysis, where we literally crush the electronic components to check if they are good enough, and also some radiation tests, which also can destruct them. And obviously, we cannot test each element in the batch. That is why we have to create a test subsample to provide tests on this testing batch, and then apply the results. Assume that the results are can be applied to whole batch. Thus, every element is tested, and test results can have completely different physical nature and units. For example, voltage, current range, gain factor, etc. On the slide, you can see the scope of work. Every chip, every semiconductor has to be tested. Every batch has to be approved, because even the smallest mistake can lead to a disaster that will cost like millions of dollars. It was shown on the first paper on the slide that the problem of allocation of homogeneous batches can be further reduced to a problem of cluster analysis, where each cluster represents one homogeneous batch. To solve the problem of identifying the homogeneous batches, the application of clustering optimization algorithms like k-means was proposed earlier by Ackerman or Canugro. In addition, authors of the third paper considered the clustering method based on the expectation maximization algorithm, which maximizes the log likelihood function. A model of separation of homogeneous production batches based on a mixture of Gaussian distributions was proposed in the fourth paper. In the fifth paper on the slide, authors proposed the use of ensembles of optimization models such as k-means, k-medoids, k-medians, expectation maximization, as well as their optimized versions, like a lot of algorithms. And also the first paper on the list proposed an approach, but it describes an application of genetic optimization algorithms with grid heuristics procedures in combination with the expectation maximization algorithm for separation of homogeneous batches of electronic devices. So the problem is quite known, and still there are a wide range of studies further. As I said, this problem of creating homogeneous batches can be reduced to the clustering problem. The clustering problem is a common unsupervised learning algorithm unsupervised learning problem, sorry. For this problem, we don't have any strict mathematical definition, but informally it can be described as follows. It is required to split the set of some objects into some subsets in such a way that within the subset, the objects are as similar to each other as possible, and it differs as much as possible from the objects of other clusters. And the similarity, like the distance between objects, is calculated by a given measure. Clustering problems often require solving a research problem, even with sufficient computing power to test all configurations of clustering algorithms. It remains unclear how to compare the results. The selection of the clustering algorithms is most often an expert task that depends on many factors. That is why there are a lot of approaches proposed on the previous slide. So as I said, there are a lot of ways to calculate distance between the objects, the similarity, and not only clustering algorithms and quality measures should be chosen, but also the measure of distance between objects. Since here in our task, we operate with a set of parameters that are distributed differently, we face the curse of dimensionality. That is why commonly used distance measures, such as Euclidean, not always can be used. And choosing an appropriate way to calculate distances is an expert problem that can consume a lot of time. And clustering measures, like how we measure if the grouping objects is appropriate, is it good enough? We can also use a lot of cluster validity indexes. In general, it can be divided into groups, external and internal measures. External ones need some additional information about clustering, and obviously we can't use them in our task because this is raw data. We don't have any labels and stuff. That's why we need to use internal measures. It uses our things of how perfect cluster should look like. On the slide, you can see an examples of such an indexes. Further, we will use silhouette criteria. And so the very process of creating homogeneous batches looks as follows. First of all, we conduct all non-destructive tests to mine the data for processing. Then observations should be normalized. After that, we try to clusterize the data with a special recursive clustering algorithm based on silhouette criteria mentioned above, proposed by Golovanov and others. Each element that is more than 2 standard deviations from the center is considered as an outlier. In conclusion, the expert chooses testing sample from both center and borders of the created batch. Since we have our parameters in different scales, volts, amperes, decibels, and so on, normalization is necessary. And after we will get dimensionless quantities that are distributed normally, log normally, exponentially, or even discrete. So in this paper, we propose the following version of the division quality characteristic for this specific task, which is represented by a vector of sign of different differences. The silhouette criterion and 3 special separation coefficients. Let us describe each of the elements. So we will assume that 2 elements of the batch have significant differences if for each parameter of the following condition is satisfied, like on the slide. Here, P1 and P2 are normalized values of the parameter of elements of 2 elements, and delta is the value of significant difference that are presetted for this exact parameter in normalized coordinates. And if we have 2 groups, G1 and G2, they are considered significantly different if their centers are significantly different. And sets of groups have significant differences if any pair of them have significant differences. And so the sign is as follows. Silhouette criterion is as follows. This is common cluster validity indices. This is the most used index that tries to minimize the inner cluster distances between objects and maximize the distance between clusters. It is easy to calculate and interpret. And the very special auxiliary separation coefficients are calculated according to the cluster radiuses and distances between centers, as you can see on the picture on the slide. It shows how clusters are separated, how dense they are, and if densities are different from each other. It allows us to set additional boundaries while testing the batches. Well, this is how they calculate it. So, experiments. To illustrate the above material, let us carry out an example of determining the area of qualitative division for batches of electronic components with this complex number. It is precision, low noise, operational amplifiers produced by some radio factory in Kaluga. As training sample, we use 10 batches of this type of electronic components that have passed the additional tests in our testing center. Information on the training sample is presented in the table on the slide. This table introduces the following designations: serial number, index, batch code, date of manufacture, where first 2 digits are the year of manufacture and second 2 digits are the ordinal number of week from the beginning of the year, and number of elements in the tested batch quantity. We have tested these parameters, and these parameters have several ranges of their values. The experiment was as follows. We mixed pairs of batches and then tried to divide them. The results show that the mixed lots are defined as homogeneous in 4% of cases, 2 out of 45. In 80% of cases, the percentage of incorrectly identified elements is up to 10%. In other cases, it is quite higher. So to show the real problem, we can illustrate it with 2 examples. First example is the common one. Like 95% of batches looks like this. They are homogeneous, but still we have to find out outliers that cannot be used in the production, although we can use outliers as the extremal values and consider that if our tests, that even if they can pass the test, the whole batch will also qualify these characteristics. The second example is quite rare. Only 5% of received batches looks like this, can be divided into homogeneous groups, but still, as it was said above, we have to create extremely reliable system. That is why even 5% of mistakes is critical. So the work presents an approach for determination of the homogeneity of the set of elements based on the clustering analysis. The whole concept of homogeneity is formulated and formalized for this exact problem. An example of the practical use of the approach for determining the homogeneity of batches of electronic components in the process of an additional test for space is given. And we assume that this methodology can be used as a basic framework in Roscosmos industry. Well, thank you. Ready to answer your questions.
Thank you for your presentation. So please, if anyone have questions, please ask. Okay, well, then I have a question. So in this sets of real data that you used, how many parameters described each object?
Well, here we provide only 2 examples. The first one have only 146 parameters of voltage and so on. And the second have only 24 parameters. It's quite smaller, but it is easier to compare objects. with
Yes, so
smaller.
I was asking because you have these pictures, this one and the other one, where you have only two axes. So how these
course.
pictures were actually built?
By dimensionality reduction algorithms. Like, I don't remember exactly, but I can guess that this particular pictures were created by principal component analysis or some density-based algorithms.
Let us add something. This is just a multi-dimensional scaling.
Okay.
Okay, I see. So more questions?
Sorry.
Okay, so I see no more questions. Okay, so then I have one more small one. So as I understood, you use something like k-means or k-midoid method as a basic method, right?
As a basic method, yes.
Yeah,
because
can we use something else? And will it be profitable? Or it's the best way to do it?
It depends. It depends because sometimes it is better to use expectation maximization algorithms, but also I can say that some specific algorithms like DBSCAN, density-based algorithms, cannot be applied here because obviously the densities of batches can differ from each other. That is why k-means based or expectation maximization algorithms based algorithms are the best choice for such a problem.
Okay, I see. Thank you. So, well, okay, if no one else is willing to ask a question, no? Okay, then thank you for your presentation. And we will move to the next one, which actually will be made again by me. So I will now turn on my screen, just a second. Yes, so please tell me if you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see a screen.
Yes, great, thank you. So this talk will be about the possibilities of neural network powder diffraction analysis of crystal structure of chemical components. So this is work made in cooperation with colleagues from the Siberian Federal University, with Alexander Zaloga and other colleagues. So this was a study that started several years ago, and well, now we are presenting some of the results. Of course, I'm not expert in diffraction analysis, but I will try to do my best to explain what was going on here in this study. So let us start. What is the problem statement actually? So we know that most of physical objects, I mean, quite a lot of them, they represent crystals. I mean, they have a crystal structure. So especially metals, but not only. So quite a lot of chemical connections, they have crystallic structure, but these structures could be quite different. For example, in this slide, you can see that although we have some some crystal structure for this material. It doesn't look very regular to the ones that we usually see. And it is important to understand these properties of crystals. Why? Because they influence the properties of the material that we use. So better understanding of how we get these properties and how they are connected with crystal structure. Based on this, we maybe will be able to learn something about new materials or maybe even design them. So it's quite an important thing to study. And how actually can we figure out what is the structure of a crystal? Obviously, we cannot look inside, yes, and somehow understand it. With our eyes, we cannot see how the crystal is composed, what is the structure inside. And but what we can do is we can try to apply the diffraction effect. So, and the diffraction pattern of crystal that we could get with X-rays, it actually may show us some important properties on so-called diffractogram. So here on the picture on the right, you see this diffractogram, which actually has several peaks in very specific cases, so under specific angles. There are peaks. Some of them are higher, some of them are lower. So this the position of these peaks depends on what kind of crystal structure does this specific material has. So obviously you need some special hardware to extract this kind of information from the material that you have in hand. But it is possible to do this, and actually, if you know this structure, you may predict what will be the properties of this particular part of materials that you have. So some of the crystals, some of the structures are similar, and some of them are not similar to each other. And in fact, there are several databases, scientific databases, where the diffraction patterns of crystals are saved. So you can actually go and download some data about the structure of some specific material and also build a diffraction pattern based on this information. So what is important to know about the differences between different structures? For example, if we stumble on some new material and we see that the diffraction pattern, this diffractogram that we received experimentally on our hardware, is not similar to anything that we have seen before. Well, in this case, we will need to determine what kind of structure is it. So what are the size of the minimal cell in this crystal structure, and find the position of atoms in this structure. So we need to determine at least 6 main parameters. So these are the angles and the lengths, if I may say so, of this main cell of the crystal structure. Of course, this is not everything. that we have, there are also space symmetry groups, and quite a lot of them. Yes, and I didn't say it. So we have 7 symmetry classes, also called syngonies, and we have 230 symmetry groups. And searching for atomic positions could be quite a challenging task even for modern algorithms. In this case, especially in steps 1, 3, and 4, so determine the symmetry, determine the symmetry class, space symmetry group, and searching the position of atoms in the identified class of crystal cell. In these cases, neural networks actually can help us very much. So, okay, next slide. Sorry, I'm trying to switch. Yes. So, as I said, there are databases which contain the crystal structures, and you can actually download them and build diffractograms for this structure. So, what do they look like? It's actually a vector of 10,000 points. It could be 5,000, depending on what is the angle step that you are using. So you can generate quite a lot of diffractograms. For example, in the ICSD structure database, there are like 192,000 structures of different materials, and for each of them you can build a diffractogram, and then, for example, you can use it for training. For example, you could train a neural network that would be able to determine the crystal structure that and the materials that you have. So, what should this neural network look like? For example, here is one of the example structures that we were using in our experiments. And this is a convolutional neural network, but it is quite specific. Why? Well, the problem is that the convolutional neural networks are actually designed for images. So for two-dimensional images, I mean, yeah, like pictures and so on. But in the case of diffraction patterns, it's a one-dimensional picture. It's just a vector. So, of course, we had to use some specific structure developed for this kind of problem. So here you can see the structure. First, we have like a vector of 5,000 by 1. Then we have a convolution layer, which takes 100 elements in a row, and then we have max pooling, then convolution, max pooling, and so on. So this is actually the structure very similar to some basic convolutional networks like AlexNet or LeNet, which were like the start of deep learning. Although this is relatively simple structure, it doesn't have some interconnection between non-consecutive layers. Still, we found that it is quite efficient. So, of course, it has fully connected layers. In our case, there were like 800, 600 neurons. And it's important to mention that we have 3 outputs, because we need to determine 7 types of crystal structure and 230 space groups, and also 97 classes that depend on the structure of the crystal. So in our experiments, we used 80% of these 192,000 diffraction patterns and 20% for testing. So the goal was to train the neural network to determine these classes of crystal structures just looking at the diffraction pattern. So, for example, for 7 symmetry classes case, here you can see the confusion matrix for these 7 classes. For example, yes, and also the description of these 7 classes. For example, the 7th class is simply a cubic structure. So this means that all 3 angles are 90 degrees and all 3 sides of the cell are equal. So it's just a cubic structure. And this is the simplest case. If we go to number 6, 5, and so on, these are more complicated cases like tetragonal, hexagonal, and so on. And the most complicated is obviously triclinic structure. So the larger the number of classes, the more symmetry we have in the structure. So what were the results that we got for these 7 classes? Actually, well, it's obvious that the more symmetry we have in the structure, the more, well, should I say structured the diffractogram is, and it is easier for the neural network to capture some important features from this diffraction pattern, and it's easier to classify. So actually for the 7th class, we had a very high accuracy value compared to other classes. And if you look at the accuracy values, the lower the symmetry, the lower the accuracy is. So of course, sometimes we had cases when we mixed different types of structures, but in most cases and on average, the results were relatively good, and in most cases we were able to achieve quite a high accuracy value, very close to 90% or even more, 91, 92% error accuracy. I mean accuracy, of course. So, and yes, on this picture, actually, you can see that compared to the total number of structures with 7 types of symmetry classes, the error values are smaller for more symmetric cases. About the symmetry group classification, obviously, this is more complicated case. And here on this graph, the black part is the accuracy of determining particular symmetry group. So this graph of distribution shows us one important thing, that the frequency of space group recognition we can observe that it follows some quadratic regression. Of course, it's not perfect, obviously, yes, but recognition of space groups increases as the symmetry increase. Of course, this is similar results as we had for the previous case. The problem here is that, for example, for some of these symmetry groups, we have like only 3 or 4 instances, even in our huge data set of 192,000 different structures. So this is one of the problems, and it may happen that, for example, for some of the classes, all the patterns were in the test set or in the training set. As I remember, there were cases where there were only one pattern for a specific class. Well, nevertheless, the results for the most presented classes were relatively good. So even though classification into 230 classes is a complicated case for even for deep neural networks, it is possible to determine the symmetry groups in such a way. What else can we do using this approach with deep neural networks? In fact, when we have a diffractogram that was received from experiment, so from some hardware, so from a real powder, it is usually different from the calculated diffractogram that for exactly the same material, the same crystal structure. So why this happens? Well, because of some errors. I mean, not errors, but some inaccuracies in measurement and so on. So obviously, we have always a difference between the experimental and calculated diffraction patterns. So, and we can, from this, we can get a different curve that will show us where are we making larger or smaller mistakes. So one of the problems here is that if we have some idea about what type of material it is, we still need to determine the position of atoms, their coordinates in the cell, and by moving the position of each atom, we can get different curves. So, and by adjusting the position of each atom, we can learn we can get some idea of where exactly the atoms are positioned in this particular material, and thus we will get the exact or nearly exactly correct one structure of the materials that we are studying. So this determination of atomic position, there are some ways to do this, like well-known ways, but they're often very inaccurate, and there is a way to do this, for example, using evolutionary algorithms. So here the idea is following. So in for example, in genetic algorithm, in differential evolution, we could use, for example, the coordinates of each atom as parameters, as the real parameters. And then we will move the atoms in the search space, calculate the diffraction pattern, and compare it to the experimental one, until we get to the true atom position. So in this study, the multi-population genetic algorithm was used. And also the idea of applying neural network was as follows. What if we will try to help the evolutionary process to classify if the diffraction pattern that is compared to the experimental one is close or not, to classify if each atom that was determined by genetic algorithm is close to its true position or if it is not. So for this purpose, there were two experiments with two structures. So this K2SN02, K4SN04 and RB4SN04. Sorry, I'm not very good in chemistry. So there was a training set of more than 150,000 different diffraction patterns, and these were extracted from the search process of the genetic algorithm. So we made a division into training and test samples, and we trained the neural network to determine if the each particular atom was in its true position, in its final true position, or at least it was close to it. So, and we figured out that it is possible to determine this with a relatively high accuracy. So, for example, in these pictures, you can see that for each atom that was present in these two crystallic structures, the accuracy of determining the true position. So obviously it is larger than 0.5. So it's much better than simply average random guessing, on average. So that means that if we would apply neural network during this search process of genetic algorithm, the neural network would inform the genetic algorithm that some of the atoms, like this one and this one, are in their true position, and maybe we shouldn't move them so much, and we should find the position of other ones. So, in conclusion, what can we say? Well, first of all, it is possible to apply neural networks to determine the symmetry groups and the space groups with relatively high accuracy for the patterns that are present in the ISCD database. And the accuracies on the test set are relatively high, close to 90%. For these 7 classes, and around 77-78% for the 230 classes. And the same structure or similar structure can be used to help the genetic algorithms or any other evolutionary algorithms to determine if the location of one or several atoms in the structure are close to their true positions. So, for example, for these two cases, for these two materials, the accuracy was around 72 and 77%. So these results show that a well-trained convolutional networks could be quite effective in helping helping to solve the problem of determining the structure of some chemical compounds. And the only thing that we need to make it possible is simply the diffraction patterns, which are, well, relatively simple to get. So thank you for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your questions.
If I may.
Ask.
Okay, please.
Yes, someone.
May. And what about traditional tests, atomic molecular clusters, Morse, Leonard-Jones, and so on, Satan, Chen, Gupta, very many interesting model in such class. What about such test problems? Can you?
You mean test problems for what exactly?
For atomic molecular clusters, special class of optimization problems.
Well, this we didn't consider this class of optimization problems. So here the optimization problem was to determine if the atoms are in the right position, and our crystal structure is the same as the real one in the real material. And this we can measure only by difference in the experimental and calculated diffraction pattern. So we considered only this type of problems.
Thank you.
Yes, that was some other question.
Yeah, if I may, I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
I had some problems, I guess, with the connection. Can you share once again, what do you have as an input signal for neural nets? Is it a spectroscopic signal, or is it image, or
Well,
spectroscopic?
so Yes, can you see? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, this is diffraction pattern. So it's like a long vector of values. And this was actually the input for the neural network. So on this slide, you see that the first layer, like input layer, is like 5,000 by 1 long vector.
Okay, and what kind of pre-processing have you done for this input?
Okay, good question. Because actually, first, what we did is we didn't use any pre-processing. So if we have calculated diffraction patterns like on this slide, yes, here you see it's very clean. So no random noise, no problems here. But we found out after several experiments that it is difficult for the neural network to capture very small peaks, which are very low. And then we simply took a square root of the intensity. So yeah, okay, we normalized intensity. Yes, this is some obvious part. Yes, when we took the square root of intensities, we got like 3 to 5% in accuracy in all cases. Then we tried cubic root and we got even better. I think we tried up to root of 4th order, and after this we didn't get any better results. So there are some problems with pre-processing with these small peaks, and yeah, we could somehow try to solve it by some tricks like square roots. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the pre-processing is important part.
Of course, yes.
One more thing is just this neural net structure was like a baseline model, and you will improve it or looking for a better one. What are the further plans?
Yes. So this one on this slide is one of the structures that we experimented with. I think yes. I mean, there could be some other ones, but with this structure we got a good result. And the thing is that adding new layers or adding new fully connected, I mean, adding new convolution layers or fully connected layers actually does not increase the test accuracy. So it simply increased overfitting. So, but decreasing the structure, we don't even have like 90% on training. So we have tried some other structures like ResNet or some popular ones, which have interconnections from one layer and after 3 layers to another one, but that didn't bring any benefit. So it appears like these kind of structures, like on this slide, are sufficient for this problem. Maybe it is possible to use something else, maybe. But so far, our experiments with structure didn't bring any good results. So this is enough, maybe, for this problem, although we don't know.
Yeah, thank you. So the new question, according to what you have just said, so do you say that you couldn't reach 100% of accuracy? I mean, even overfitting is not reachable for this data set.
I mean, with this kind of structure, the training accuracy for 7 classes was like 99%. But for 230 classes, of course, it was smaller, like 95, 96 maybe. But it's just because of too many classes.
So overfitting is possible.
Yes, yes, of course. And it happens. Yes, it happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Well, all right, then I will stop my demonstration, and I guess that our next presenter is Ivan Ryzhikov, right? So
Yes, it's true.
with presentation about the role of penalties and computational resources in NMR, water content analysis parameter identification with differential evolution. So differential evolution again, please, you may start.
Yes. Do you see the screen? The presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So, yeah, my topic was already announced. We are working in application research, and it is related to the NMR water content analysis, and we are trying to solve the identification problem. And we use kind of basic evolution research. And our research is actually about how can we improve solving the optimization problem, and how can we be sure that by solving optimization problem, we solve the real one, the water content analysis problem. So this work is done by two institutions. So the first one is the University of Eastern Finland, and the second is University of Applied Science. Okay, so a short outline. First, we will have a little introduction about the problem, about what we are trying to solve, why we are trying to solve this, and what is NMR signal actually. Then we discuss the problem reduction, actually how we came from this identification problem to optimization one. And then I will share some results that proving that some of things that we are trying to implement actually works. Also I will give some results about how resources does affect on the performance and on the results that we receive. And after that, some short part of the conclusion. So why we came to this problem? There is such a thing that is sludge. So it's a mixture of a liquid and the solid parts. So it can be in different forms, and it actually happens on many different industries, in various industries. So here is on a slide when we work with the pulp refinement, when we work with the water processing, no matter is it drinking water, wastewater, which is really important. And also the moisture estimation in solid materials, which happens in various of different production too. And liquid fuels productions and so on. There are many of different applications where we need to understand what sludge do we have and how can we dewater it. So separate the solid part from the liquid one. And this sludge dewatering problem is actually very difficult. This control efficiency depends on material analysis, as it says, and one of the most important part that the sludge dewatering is really expensive. So it requires a lot of energy and requires some specific chemicals which are really expensive, so we can control the sludge dewatering process. It is also very important for environment, because in some case, like wastewater treatment, this sludge needs to be processed well, so we don't spoil the environment. As I said already, this dewatering is complex, but how can we improve the performance of our control, the efficiency? When we understand what do we have actually in the liquid, we know exactly how much energy we need to add to the liquid if we heat it, for example, or how much of these chemicals do we need to add. So one more thing, that usually when we're speaking about this sludge dewatering, we know that we have a flow, it's a liquid, so it's a flow, it's a production line, which is continuous, and we need our analysis to be fast. And so one of the greatest options of that is this nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. It is really fast, it is cheaper than many other analytical systems. And it's very easy in sample preparation. So it can actually be working on the fly. So that's why this NMR is very attractive to many industries. Well, it proved its efficiency in reliability in many different applications. Well, it's really easy to implement, but unfortunately, the spectroscopic signal is noised sometimes. So there are some limitations on the methods that we apply to identify the signal and the components which are in the liquid. So here in this research, we consider two main approaches and focus on one of them, the first one. So the first one is optimization-based solid fitting problem. Actually, we've tried machine learning-based parameter prediction, but we didn't succeed in that yet. So that's why we talk today about the optimization. So, okay, mathematical model is what you can see on the slide right now. So we can see that the mathematical model is really simple. So that is surprising that this problem is kind of complex. So you see that it is just the sum of exponents. And so the model can be characterized by this equation. So we have alphas parameters and theta parameters and C, and those are parameters we need to identify. And so it's just the sum of exponential signals, okay? And that is the simplest fitting criteria that we can use. So it shows us the quadratic difference between the observation signal and the output. And our goal is to find the best parameters that brings the minimum to this criteria. So this is the one and only slide with so many different mathematic formulas, but they are very simple, and I'm going to explain you. So what we want to do, we want to guide our search, right? So how are you doing it? So the first thing is there is a great difference between those two parameters, alpha and theta, and those differences are thousands. So alpha is much bigger in its magnitude. So how can we solve this problem? We actually use this transformation. So we use this inverse exponential transformation. So in that case, we are searching through this eta with a curve, and this eta with a curve in that case is pretty close to the alpha. So their magnitude is the same. So that's the first condition that is important, condition number 4. And those two are just the penalties. So simple linear penalties, it's just a penalty function f u for amplitude and f sub u for theta. And we just check if we violate this limitation, these borders, then we finalize the function. So in the end, we have a criterion like this. So it's our basic criterion, our fitting criterion, where we slightly modified the transformation of the theta parameter, or so-called transition time. And here we have these penalties for left and right border. And now we're going to find the parameters which are best for this criterion. So actually, in that case, we reduced the problem. So we had a signal, and we need to find this parameters which brings the minimum to the signal. It is the solution, and by this solution we can justify what components we have in the water. But the problem is, if we find the solution that brings the maximum to this criteria, do we really find the actual parameters? So this is the main research question, because we can solve the fitting problem very well, but do we actually solve the initial problem? So that is the question. And in our research, we implemented, used and utilized the very simple differential equation algorithm. So we call it vanilla differential equation on this slide. So I believe that all of you know what is the differential evolution algorithm, so I'll not be stopping here. It have only two control parameters. We call it control parameters, so we distinguish these two parts. So control parameters, crossover rate and differential weight, and also two parameters for resources, let's say. So it's population size and number of iterations. Okay, so resources, we mean if we change those, we change the number of computation of the function. So what is also important? So since we know the expected parameters values, we use this information when generated. I'm not stopping there right now, and all the details would be in the paper. So it shouldn't be in the focus of our attention right now. So about experimental design. So we have control parameters, and here you can see the set. So we varied all these parameters and tested their combinations. So for each of the run, we have 20 different initial populations, but whatever combination parameter we have, we test them on the same initial population. And for each parameter combination and initial population, we have 20 runs. So all in all, in general, we have 400 runs for each setting. So the resources are the following. So the population size is 100 and the number of iterations is 500, if not mentioned another. So the simple simulation, really simple one that we use, and this is one of the hardest case in a practical application. So that's why we started with this one. So there is shortly presented what are the amplitudes and what are the relaxation times. So our constant is 0, and this is how we perform a signal. So it's pretty simple. We just generated the time on some interval and then map it to the model output. Okay, so here we come closer to experimental results we have for this differential evolution. And I would like to recall that we want to answer the main question. By solving the fitting problem or optimization problem, do we actually solve the parameter identification problem, right? Because this is the most important part. So we start with the research of the algorithm parameters. So you can see that here we varied the F and CR parameters, and you can see that increase of F and increase of crossover probability, we see that actually our metric is going worse. So its median value is growing. So that could make us think that, okay, increase of the searching parameters actually lead to having a worse solution. But we need to be more precise, right? We need to check which of those combinations are really good or bad. So that's why we have these heat maps where we present this differential weights versus crossover probability. And here we use the logarithm of our average error because because if we don't use logarithm, this heat map is not so representative. So you can see that the darker values we have, the better actually algorithm works. And you can see that there is this area where the parameters are good. But let's have a look here. We can see that, okay, here we have this fitting criteria on this slide, on this plot B. We have the parameter identification criteria, and we see that they have different results. So best there are not best there. And that is very bad for us. I mean, if we focus on getting a very good solution according to the MSE criteria, probably we will not have a good solution in our parameter identification, which is scary. It means that everything is useless. So let's have a closer look on the results that we have. So here is a scatter plot where you can see on the x-axis is the fitting criteria value, the logarithm of it actually. And on y-axis, you can see the parameter estimation accuracy. So how far our solution from the real one, how far the parameters from the real one. And you can see that there are so many cases when actually our error is very small. So its logarithm is not larger than -5. So it is pretty good solution. It can be -20, but even for those solutions, we have very bad parameters. So the system has the same output, but the parameters are different. And there are this kind of peaks, which are kind of confusing. So when we try to analyze what is the nature of these peaks, we found that it is because of the mathematical model representation. So these exponents, if those values become too big, it means that we have really great magnitude in the exponential degree. So it means, and if it's negative, it makes the exponent equal to 0. So in that case, we just exclude those exponents, but our model don't know it. And in that case, it doesn't matter which amplitude does it have. So that's why we have the peaks. And then we try to regularize it, and we added the penalty. So the first penalty we add is 20, because we know from the practical point of view that amplitude should not be greater than 20. We don't expect it. So that's why we have this kind of a limitation. And you can see that, okay, this kind of sea unicorn became like a strange wolf. So, but still we have these peaks. And by analyzing this, we found that also there can be a problem in a magnitude of exponential parameters. So the next limitation we had is also the right border limitation, and it's not 20, it's 10 right now. So, and we see that we've gotten a better situation, but yet we still have not so much, but not so good solution either. And so when we go deeper into that, we found that it also can be related with the negative values of the degrees. And that's why we also had this left border limitation, which is 0. So now it's not an animal, it more looks like a liver, right? So you see that the situation improved greatly. We still have solutions which are not really good. When we speak about how close we are getting into the parameters, because the logarithm of 3 is kind of also a large number, but yet it's not logarithm of 40, right? So let's have a look on this heat map of the parameters. So we can see that results are actually got worse, right? So here are the best ones, the best differential evolution parameters for the criteria, but you can see that at the same time, those parameters are worst in case of identification of the real water components. So this is a bad news, right? And now we start our next part of the research is called resources. So does actual resources can improve this situation or not? So we started with the population size, and on these plots you can see how does this population size, what influence it has on this criteria. So on the left plot, you can see its influence on the fitting criteria, on the right plot on the parameter identification. So you see that, okay, fitting criteria is getting slightly better with the increase of the population size. And also we can say that the parameter estimation is also getting slightly better, but not probably we don't reach the condition that we want. Well, but here you can see, so different population sizes, but let's focus on the best one. So the best one was the 5,000s. Unfortunately, we don't have any improvement there, except we've got this intersection, like this right bottom corner. So we see that it's the same, but still we don't see any guarantees, you know. So this is very, very strange to see the situation like that. And it means that we are in a risky situation. So if even we improve it, we don't guarantee to have a good solution. And what makes us think that there should be something else is this left bottom corner, because we can see that if we slow down our crossover and if we have really small differential weights, we actually got a better solution. It means that there is something problematic happening during the search. So probably we need to have a closer look on that. But okay, so now let's have the same, let's have a look on the same plot. So where are this MSE criterion and parameter estimation? You see that we have the same lever, right? It's just we have a little bit trend here, which we didn't see before. So here we have this logarithm of -10, which is great. So actually we have a hope that we can find a solution by increasing the computational resources. Okay, and here is a focus. So we filter out everything and leave only the population size, which is 5,000. And you can see that we cannot say that it is a trend, but probably if we have more experiments, we will prove it. But yet there you can see that we can find like logarithm of -5 for the parameter identification, which is very nice. But still we have this part, so not very good ones. So it's logarithm, so those are not very good solutions. So the next step is what if we change the iterations? Yeah, and so the population size is 100, so we take one step backwards and we change the iteration number. And you can see that actually now we have really great improvement. So the log of our fitting criteria comes to -80. So it's wonderful results. But what is even more, what is better? Yeah, what is better is that our fitting, our parameter accuracy now reaches -60 in logarithmic magnitude. So we are very, very close, even though we have really small parameters, we're very close to those. Okay, let's have a closer look. So now our lever is somewhere here and we have a really recognizable trend, right? So we can see that actually our hypothesis is correct. So when we have a better results for our MSE, we have a better results for our parameter identification criteria. So, and when we focus on the best settings, we see that algorithm with those settings in 100% of the cases finds a solution that are very close to the parameter estimation criteria, since you see the magnitude of the accuracy is -60. So it's exact parameters that we are looking for. And so the last slide shows us that finally we match, we have a match of the best parameters for our criterion that we know and criterion that we don't know. Yeah, but we want to be close to those values. So you can see that those two figures are identical. So those are actually the result. Yeah, one more important thing is just this slide shows us this one and this one too, that actually when we change resources, we really seriously change the heat map. So the best parameters for one resource is actually the worst for another one. So, okay, coming back to the conclusion, sorry for this jumping. So the most important part of this project or study is that we prove that there is a relation between those criteria. So the first criterion we reduced our problem to, and the second it's a real identification criteria. We found the best algorithm for now that will be the baseline algorithm that we are going to try to outperform. And so the other directions of our work is related to the combining of this approaches like the optimization and machine learning, which we are not successful right now because we don't have such a nice prediction rate as we have in optimization. Okay, so that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and I'll be glad answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for your presentation. Dear colleagues, you have chance to ask as many questions as you would like, because Ivan asked many questions and deserved be asked.
Okay.
Okay, I see that there are nobody who would like to ask any question.
Fine.
That is why we have to say thank you very much, Ivan, for presentation.